Well, good morning, everyone. It is 9 o'clock, and Rep. Aaron has requested, she is the prime of our first bill, and she has requested that we introduce it for her. So I'm going to call on Senator Gendreau to do that. Unless Representative McGuire, you are here, you are a co-sponsor on this. Would you rather introduce this for her?
No, that's fine. We're, whatever.
Okay, we'll let Senator
She's
Gendreau
got
know
a
since she's
letter
there.
here that can
She
be
does.
read. Do you want to do that? No?
Okay,
I'm in support of the bill, but I'm not.
all right, fair enough. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just noticed you were a co-sponsor. All right, Senator Gendreau, we'll open up the hearing on House Bill 30, and
Okay.
thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Carrie Gendreau, Senator Gendreau from District 1. And Judy Aaron, New Hampshire State Rep, had sent in a letter, and I'll be reading that for her on her behalf. Dear Senate Executive Departments and Administration Committee members, I am introducing HB 30 to you today. This bill allows the county commissioners to exempt the county chief administrative officer from compulsory membership in the state retirement system. This bill came to the legislature in the House in the form of HB 1561, HB 141, and in 2020 and 2021, respectively. Both times they passed this committee and were subsequently added to Senate omnibus bills that got tabled during COVID. It is about time that we get this issue settled and passed. There is no need for our county managers to be compelled to participate in the state retirement system, especially if they already have retirement plans elsewhere. Most of them have come up through the system and already vested in Group 1 and therefore very likely to stay, but some may have an exception. We should give them the right to choose. The financial impact to the state retirement system is nil. This passed unanimously through the House, and we should pass this again through the Senate as well. Thank you, Judy Aaron, New Hampshire State Representative, Sullivan County, District 4.
Thank you, Senator. I guess we won't ask anybody to ask you questions, since that wouldn't be fair. Okay. Marty Carlin wants to speak and is neutral from the New Hampshire retirement system. Good morning, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the record, Marty Carlin representing the New Hampshire retirement system. The retirement system doesn't have a position on House Bill 30. I just signed up to speak to give a little bit of background information and try to answer any questions. What this bill seeks to do is to allow a county to exempt its administrator from mandatory participation in NHRS when they hire somebody. So the next person that comes in by a vote of the governing body, they can take the position out of NHRS and offer their own other retirement plan or whatever they can. This provision has been in law for municipal administrators, town managers, et cetera, since the early 70s. So local municipalities have had this option, for many years. This would allow counties the same leeway. Since there's only 10 counties and 10 administrators, it wouldn't have any discernible impact on NHRS rates or contributions or anything, because not everyone may opt to be exempted upon hiring. That would be part of the negotiation. So that's it in a nutshell. It is a pretty straightforward bill.
Thank you. I'm quickly reading, and I thought of this question. I haven't had a chance, and it might say it in here. Will this allow current members to opt out of being in the system who are currently in, or is this only for new hires?
We read it as only for new hires, because the election to exempt is upon hiring.
Okay.
There's another way that counties can currently exempt administrators if they give them a fixed term appointment, and I think there may be one or two counties doing that already, but that's sort of a different animal.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Aye.
Senator Altshuler?
Yeah, thank you. I understand that you're appearing neutral on this, but in your experience, it's noticeable that all of the sponsors are from Sullivan County. Is this a particular issue for Sullivan County? Because as a former member of the county,
Yeah,
I don't remember hearing this as a problem in Rockingham.
yeah, this came to light a few years ago, and I don't recall which county it was. Perhaps it is Sullivan because of the sponsorship. There was someone who, you know, came and was wanted to be exempt, and you know, when they reached out, we explained that, you know, the law doesn't allow that for counties. And you know, the bill has been introduced a couple of times. It, you know, died during COVID in 19. So there's no ongoing disputes with the retirement system with any of the counties over the positions. I think we made our position clear to them over time, and you know.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming
Thank
in. Kate?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Kate Horgan, New Hampshire Association of Counties. The association is in support of this bill. This is a very simple bill. To answer a couple of the things that came up, the 3 counties that currently hire their administrator under a fixed term are Stratford County, Merrimack County, and Sullivan County. Senator Altshuler, you probably haven't heard of this as an issue in Rockingham because Rockingham doesn't have an administrator. They have a director of finance who does some of the same things, but many of the counties also have a director of finance as well. So that's just how they operate. Carroll County also does not have a county administrator. The commissioners are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the county. So it is unlikely, unless they went out and hired an administrator, that this would impact them as well. We see this as a recruitment opportunity. It was a slight issue for Merrimack as well until they found the workaround contract because their administrator used to be the superintendent of corrections. So he was group 2. Group 1, he would have had to lose some of his benefits by doing that switch, so they worked with the retirement system to find that solution. It is a very simple bill, and it would just put us on par with the town administrators who have had this option since the 70s. I am happy to take any questions.
Stratford, Merrimack, what was the third county?
Sullivan,
Sullivan. And what did you call it? A fixed
contract.
Fixed contract, okay.
So I believe, and Mr. Carlin can correct me if I'm wrong, but you cannot fire them under a fixed contract at will.
Yeah.
And so this would give commissioners the opportunity, if something were to happen, to have that at will option if they needed it. But Stratford County's administrator has been there for 30 years, so.
Any questions?
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have one other person signed in not speaking, Carol McGuire from Merrimack 27, who is in favor. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on House Bill 30? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. Philip, do we know if Senator Carson is here? Okay, but she is coming. Okay. So I'm going to suggest to the committee that we could exec as we go. We're 5 minutes ahead here of our next hearing. But if we do wait for Senator Carson, anything we do exec could go on consent. So would that be okay with the committee to wait?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we will take a 5-minute recess and reconvene at 9:15. Being 9:16, we will open up the hearing for Senate Bill 193. And, Representative Lekis, you want to introduce? Yes. Good morning, welcome to EDNA.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Representative Tony Lekis, representing Hillsborough 38, the towns of Hudson and Litchfield. So this bill was at the request of the New Hampshire retirement system. It does various cleanup and a few other things in the statute. There's, I think, 8 or 9 sections here, and I can go through them. The first one has to kind of cleans up the language around teachers who job share. So there is already a provision where you can have, 2 people who basically fill one teaching position, and they might split, what days they were teaching. We heard from the employees union for the teachers, I think he's here, that they either are or are looking to do splits like not just days, but mornings and evenings, mornings and afternoons, that sort of thing. And they're not all exactly 50-50. And so this cleared that up, and both the teachers and the retirement system were fine with Section 1. Section 2, special duty or extra duty is details for which the employer bills or charges another entity. So it's like you have somebody out there when they're working on the power lines, and the power company is paying for that. And this deals with how the retirement system handles that. The issue is there was an ambiguity because you may have somebody, say a police officer, who's working under some program, which he's doing normal police work, but it's being paid for, let's say, by a federal grant or something like that. It's to clarify that that isn't special duty, so it's treated as normal, his normal work. It's during normal work hours typically. And just to clarify that. Let's see. And for 3, this deals with, and some of these I may defer on details to Mr. Carlin. And actually, this is 3 is one I will do that. And if you're okay with it, if he could come up here and join me, if that's okay.
Why don't you finish introducing, and then we'll
I'll
have
do
you
that.
and speak to those sections.
Yep. Okay. Part 4 deals with, this is one where, somebody has left their employment and therefore the retirement system, and they come back. There is already a provision where they can purchase, in effect, the time that they were missing to bring their seniority in the retirement system up to would be if they hadn't left, or at least partway up there. And the problem is there are 2 sections in statute nearby that both deal with this, but they're in conflict. One of them says that they can't get less than 1 year or 1 month, I think, and the other one's 6 months. And so this just brings them into agreement. And Section 5, that's page 2, line 11, starting there. You're required, if you're going to enroll, let's see. Yeah. There are situations where someone can enroll optionally, and if they don't within a certain amount of time, then they're not eligible. And this makes it clear that if they haven't enrolled because the employer didn't get the information to them on time, that it's not their fault. 6 is military service credit. This deals with some situations where people repeatedly have to leave the work and suspend their involvement in the retirement system because they got deployed or have some other service and come back, and that may happen repeatedly. And New Hampshire is actually pretty generous that we'll give them up to 3 years worth of credit, if they're gone for that time. And there's some complications with this happening multiple times, and details on that I will defer to Mr. Carlin. I went through their lawyer with this, and we put the bill together, and it's been too long. I don't remember some of the details.
I know that one.
And 7, that's the last one, service retirement. Again, this is a situation where there's exactly the same language in 2 places, and it just, while we're in here dealing with this, it cleans that up. And I think there's another one. Okay, let's see if I get anything else. Okay, that's it.
You good? All right. Any questions for Representative Lucas? Seeing none, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Marty, we'll bring you back again. You're speaking but neutral position.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Marty Carlin, representing the New Hampshire retirement system. It's one of the rare occasions where I'll say the retirement system is in support of this legislation. We do want to thank Representative Lekes for sponsoring it for us through House eDNA. He met with us, and we went over this in fairly good detail with him over the summer and in eDNA. These changes are attempt to clarify ambiguous passages or sections of the statute where they don't comport exactly, in the references, things like that. The board does have the ability in statute to request legislation in order to better serve the members of the system from an administrative purpose. So, if it was a, benefit or cost related, the board wouldn't, be asking to change the law, but for plan administration and more efficient and proper administration. So that's what we believe this falls under. I think Representative Lekes did a good job talking about it. If there's any provisions that jumped out at you that you want to ask about, I can try to fill in additional information on that.
All right. I think the only one that I picked up was in Section 6 about the military service credit. Is it possible for someone to go on a deployment, come back for 1 year, work a little bit, and go on another employment and still get 3 years service credit and do that multiple times?
Yeah, it changes it to cumulative, but that's not for one deployment. That's if somebody, a guard or reservist, did 6 months or a year, they could get up to 3 months, in totality for multiple deployments, up 3 years rather. And all that's necessary for that is just to provide the documentation, the DD 214 to us, and we just add it to the member's record for service.
But it's possible for them to do that more than one time?
Yes, for a maximum of a total of 3 years, regardless of how many deployments and how much time they were actually gone. And actually, there was one other section of that bill I did put a star on the note next to on page 3, lines 8 and 9. There's a repeal of a section. This is for prior military service before joining NHRS. Members can buy that once they have 10 years of service with NHRS. And Section 1, it was pointed out to us last year by a lawmaker that provision is in conflict with federal law, which is why we want to strike it out. Whether or not someone's getting a military pension or not, we can't prohibit them from buying prior military service for that time served. So that was, we tend to save up these little technical things, and then when we have something we need to get changed, we kind of put them all together, and that was the sort of precipitating event for us bringing the bill forward this year, was that one change.
Any further questions from the committee? I think they're gonna let you off real easy.
Thank you very much. This was about the easiest day I've had in about 2 months, so thank you.
Well, I tried to group all of the bills together that you would have to come over for. Okay, Carol McGuire has, from Merrimack 27, has signed in favor, and Brian Hawkins from NEA New Hampshire has signed in favor. Representative Lekis, did you have further comment?
Just for completeness, I missed the last section, with section 9, and all it does is change the name of the financial report because the organization that the standards body changed the name. So that's all. I just didn't want to leave that out.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Anyone else that wishes to speak on this bill before we close the hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 193. We have about 4 minutes until the next one, so I guess we're in the same situation, and Senator Carson isn't here, so we'll resume again at 9:30. to open the hearing on House Bill 109, and we'll recognize Rep. Lekis to introduce the bill. Good morning again.
Thank you and good morning. Again, for the record, I'm Representative Tony Lekis, representing Hillsborough 38. So this bill does a couple things. One is clean up the language describing what occupational therapists do. The last time this language was changed was about 22 years ago. And it doesn't change the scope of practice, but it just updates the language to what's currently used in the industry. The one substantive change is it removes the requirement for a doctor's referral to get occupational therapy. You can get chiropractic, you can get various other things without a doctor's referral. Now, your insurance may still require a referral to pay, and this does not affect that. It just removes the requirement from New Hampshire statute to do that. And there's some reasons for that. And there's occupational therapy isn't just the normal your doctor refers you because you have a problem, you get occupational therapy. But they work in a number of environments, including in occupational therapy in schools for those with disabilities, and also in businesses on-site ergonomic consults to prevent workplace injuries. And as it stands today, just to do that, they would have to get a doctor's referral for each person they're dealing with, and that just stands in the way of them doing what they need to do. The other thing is the amendment also makes it clear that the professions that are separately licensed, such as recreational therapists, may engage in the practice they're licensed in without also requiring license as an occupational therapist. So there are things like recreational therapists and occupational therapists where some of their scope of practice overlaps. And it just makes it clear that if you're doing recreational therapy, you don't need an occupational therapy license as well, as long as you're within the scope for recreational therapists, and vice versa. And that's basically what I have.
Representative, where in this bill is that specifically that removes that requirement? I'm trying to look at it real quick here. Do you know off the top of your head? Oh, it might be on page 3.
Yeah.
Looks like it's page 3. Sorry, I just saw it. Yep. Okay, I get it.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. And I had marked as speaking for 409, but somebody's shown up for that, and I'll defer to them.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, Danielle. You wish to speak in favor? Just hit the button until the red light comes on. There you
The
go.
red light, okay. My name's Danielle Amaro. I'm the president of the New Hampshire Occupational Therapy Association. I live in Somersworth. I want to thank Representative Lekis for his wonderful introduction. He kind of hit all the highlights. I did want to be available for any questions, but the language that was describing practice was over 20 years old. And so we just updated it with our current National Association language, and that referral requirement, as Representative Lekis so aptly described, was a barrier to access. So removing it kind of puts us in line with our sibling professions of especially physical therapy and speech therapy, and will widen access and reduce some of the burden administratively for especially the school systems. So.
Any questions? You can back. Did you have any questions? No. Okay. So removing the requirement is a positive thing from your opinion then?
It's a very positive thing from my perspective, and it doesn't affect, you're still going to need, my background is hospital-based practice, you'll still need a referral for payers, insurance companies, so it doesn't change much about how occupational therapy works in those situations, but will open up access in schools and industry, in behavioral health clinics, with people who don't have physicians. So.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
I have two other people signed in favor, Carol McGuire from Merrimack District 27 and Daniel Wise from the New Hampshire Occupational Therapists Association. Anybody else that would like to speak on House Bill 109? Excuse me, before I close the hearing. Seeing none, we'll close it. We are still in the same situation. We're running ahead, which is not a bad thing, but
Should we vote on review or?
we can, they just won't go on, they just won't go on consent, that's the problem.
I didn't get the impression she was definitely coming.
Okay. Okay. We're not in a hurry on these. We have no deadlines, so it's up to all of you.
I would rather have them check in on them too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I think we'll wait to exact, because I honestly see these as very simple bills, and they could go right on consent calendar without issue, and really would be respectful of the Senate's time when we actually get to the session. So we will recess until 9:45. Back with the committee here, and we'll open the hearing on House Bill 409 and recognize Rep. Power to introduce the bill. Good morning and welcome to EDNA. Thank you. Turn you there.
Thank you and good morning, honorable committee members and Mr. Chairman. As the prime sponsor, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce to you today House Bill 409. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline, Mason, and Greenville in Hillsborough County, District 36. This is a simple, straightforward bill that modifies the requirements for non-resident licensure by the Board of Cosmetology, Barbering, and Aesthetics so that current out-of-state licenses in good standing are recognized by the board without any additional requirements. For beauty professionals that have already successfully completed their education, obtained the required training hours, passed a professional licensing exam, and have therefore met all the standards and requirements to be able to obtain a state license by a state licensing body, placing additional requirements on applicants that they would have to navigate in order to obtain a license in New Hampshire is unnecessary, burdensome, and costly. This bill addresses this problem, and it also has a number of positive benefits. So first, this bill streamlines the application process for out-of-state beauty professionals who would like to work in New Hampshire. And it enables them to more easily become licensed in the Granite State without any unnecessary red tape. Moreover, this bill also simplifies the process for both OPLC and the board. Currently, OPLC must continuously monitor the standards in other states in order for them to compare the standards for people that are coming here from out of state wanting to get a New Hampshire state license. Second, this bill benefits workers, employers, and customers by creating greater access to skilled labor and beauty services in the Granite State, which boosts our economy. By allowing out-of-state licensed beauty professionals to be able to work sooner than later, this bill clearly supports working families, which may be single-parent families, military families who move a lot due to changing military assignments, and also for economically disadvantaged families. Furthermore, New Hampshire has a severe labor shortage. As I recall, in support of a similar bill that I filed last year, and it did make it here to the Senate, Supercuts did testify that they were in support of this bill and that they were, in fact, having difficulty filling positions within their stores due to the shortage of licensed beauty providers. So this bill helps to expand our labor force by streamlining the licensing process for out-of-state beauty professionals. Therefore, this bill supports our economy as well as Granite Staters. And lastly, by eliminating unnecessary red tape for beauty professionals, this bill supports the governor's initiative included in his recent budget proposal to reform occupational licensing in New Hampshire. So in conclusion, this bill applies only to licensed beauty professionals who have current out-of-state licenses that are in good standing. This bill requires the board to recognize these licenses and grant New Hampshire licenses without any additional requirements. And this bill enables beauty professionals to start working sooner and without unnecessary red tape. This bill supports the governor's initiative to reform licensing. And lastly, this bill benefits workers, employers, and customers, which in turn supports our hardworking New Hampshire families. That concludes my bill introduction, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I have one, I guess, to start.
Yep.
Do other states have reciprocity with our licenses? So in other words, if you get a New Hampshire license, can they go to other states and have this, enjoy the same
So
ability?
Yes, that there are other states which have a streamlined, simplified, out-of-state licensing process. So the answer is yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Other questions? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you for taking my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm curious if we are to, right now, our requirements are that everyone, barbers, master barbers, cosmetologists, estheticians, all have to have completed high school or their HiSit. And if we were to just blanket accept licenses from other states, then we're essentially lowering our own standards, because some of the standards from other states, like for instance, Oklahoma, only requires that you have a minimum achieved grade 8. And there are states that do not require a high school education, do not require our minimum 1,500 hours of training, do not require that there be any kind of, I guess it's an internship where you have to work alongside a licensed barber or a licensed cosmetologist. And we have minimum requirements of 3,000 hours that we came to, and actually we spent, in 2019, we spent almost $250,000 of a U.S. grant evaluating our own requirements and streamlining our occupational licensing requirements. So why, I'm curious as to why we would lower our standards instead of asking people who are perhaps in the profession to, you know, raise their game and come to our standards, because we have a baseline that is actually not as high as some states. We're kind of in the middle. So that's my question, is why would we lower our own standards?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So the focus, in my opinion, should be on the state licensing. As I explained, that out-of-state licensed beauty professionals, they have in fact obtained education in the field for barbering, cosmetology, or aesthetics. And they have in fact passed and met all the requirements of the state that licensed them, and of course taken a state licensing exam. So therefore that should be the focus, that these individuals are in fact, they've been licensed by a state licensing body in another state. So I can go out of state to a wedding that's maybe in California, and you know, I can get my hair done by a cosmetologist that's licensed in the state of California. And to me, it doesn't make any sense that if that same person was in New Hampshire, that New Hampshire wouldn't allow them to do my hair in New Hampshire. It's still the same two people getting a service and somebody providing the service. So like I said, the focus should be on the licensing, that they have met the requirements. Your hair doesn't change just because you're not in a particular state.
Follow up, Mr.
Follow
Chair?
up? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you for taking a follow up. Essentially, though, if we are to adopt this, then we adopt the lower standards of the lowest standing state, the lowest minimum education requirements, the lowest minimum passing of their test requirements, and some of them are, C- on their testing. So we're talking about, we're not just necessarily talking about someone who's going to, curl your hair and do an updo at a wedding. We're talking about people who will be using color chemicals, who will be doing using, chemical straighteners, who will be applying peels on your face. Like this is beyond a simple haircut. And our requirements are what we have considered to be the minimum that it would be safe and for residents in the state of New Hampshire. So essentially what we're saying with this legislation is that our requirements are not, would be, you know, would that be fair to the people who have achieved their requirements here in New Hampshire to have someone come in from another state that has far, far less of an education requirement, of a practice requirement, and for them to be able to just fold into the system? Would we be changing our own requirements by adopting this?
So could you clarify the question? I understand where you're coming from and what you're saying.
The question is, why would we adopt a lower standard for the sake of bringing someone in?
So
And then subsequently, would that not affect the people who are getting their licenses here to petition that they also don't have to meet such a high standard?
Okay, thank you for that follow-up. And so my response to that would be that the standards in each state to get a license, based on my research and my understanding, they are arbitrary. There's no scientific analysis that says that if a person has X number of hours, that they're going to be, you know, better or more competent than someone else that has a different number of hours. And furthermore, the curriculum in, you know, for cosmetology, it doesn't, barbering and aesthetics, it does not vary wildly, you know, from state to state and to school. There's core curriculum that you know, students learn as they go through their education. And also what I would say too is consider if you had a student that was a recent graduate and passed the licensing exam in New Hampshire with really no work experience to speak of, and you had someone coming from, say, California with 30 years experience, I mean, there's a difference there with regards to experience. And learning never, you know, stops. Learning is continuous. So for New Hampshire to grant a new grad a license and for them to be able to work, you know, going along with the point that you're trying to make, I guess that would be a counterpoint, that someone else with an out-of-state license with many, many more years of experience, I might argue that they would be a better beauty service provider than a new grad. And that's simply not how things work.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
One more?
I appreciate what you're saying, but this bill doesn't make that allocation. This bill doesn't say an applicant holding a current license in good standing with X number of years experience with, you know, no complaints against them from their state board. That's not what this says. This says a blanket lowering of the standards to the lowest states, whatever state has the lowest standards, which in the review of the executive summary and the tables that are from this 2019 OPLC review of these standards, we're looking at states that require an 8th grade education, no high school diploma, very little practice experience, and that's not to say that they're good. It just means that they got a license in their state, and moving to New Hampshire doesn't make them expert just because they've been doing it for 10 years. There are lots of people who do lots of things for a lot of years and aren't good at it. So this doesn't allow for that experience. This is everybody. So would you be open to changing that language?
Thank you for the second follow-up question. So this bill now, it belongs to the Senate ED&A committee. So I would be open and willing to have a discussion for whatever this committee feels that they want to do with regards to the language of this particular bill.
Thank you. Actually, that generated a question for me as I was listening to the conversation back and forth, and thank you both for that. So OPLC is, are they going to be required to do a check on the good standing or the standing of the license holder's license? Because it says in good standing in the bill. Would that burden fall upon OPLC?
Well, my understanding is currently that they already do that. And in fact, the bill as I filed it did not have that language in good standing. When I introduced the bill to the House eD&A committee, a representative from OPLC had some detailed, I guess, insight, despite the fact that this bill was reviewed by attorneys, at least 3. And I guess OPLC felt that they wanted to have that particular language in good standing, and so therefore it was amended into the bill by the House eD&A. So yes, and currently right now, OPLC needs to, survey constantly the requirements and standards for 50 states plus the territories. And that's very burdensome. And laws change all the time. So currently that's something that they do.
All right, well, I had one other one, I'll ask it. I'd be more appropriate of OPLC, but you did well on the first one, I'll ask you this one too.
Okay.
Can any other state deny a request for info in the sense of OPLC reaching out and asking, is this license in good standing? Is there any complaints against this license holder? Is there anything that would compel the other states to answer those questions? And again, that may not be a question you can answer.
I can't, based on my understanding and what I know, that's how these states work, because they need to get information about licensing. So although I can't definitively answer that question because I'm not with OPLC, I would say that yes, of course, that's something that they interact.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all the questions I had. Anybody else? All right, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Ross Connolly from AFP. Good morning and welcome.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ross Connolly. I'm the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire. Here today to voice our support for HB 409. As we've heard, New Hampshire is in the top 10 states with the lowest unemployment in the nation. If you speak to any business owner, employer, they will tell you one of the most difficult parts of their current growth projections is finding qualified employees. Salons, barbershops, and cosmetology services are not immune to this. Both big chain stores like Great Clips and Supercuts and small locally owned shops are struggling to find new qualified licensed employees. The licensure requirements for cosmetology are generally uniform across the states where most of these workers would come from, which is New England, and all comply with standard recommendations from the national overseeing organizations. Just for instance, both Massachusetts and Maine require 1,000 hours of training to acquire a license. Same, you still have to go to school, same base requirements. Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire all require 1,500 hours of training. But again, all New England states comply with the 1,000-hour recommendation from the national standards groups. These slight differences in requirements do not increase the risk of public safety. We've seen in many, many studies that there is not an increased risk to the consumer between a state that requires 1,000 hours and a state that requires 1,500 hours. This makes the decision to recognize these out-of-state licenses as a no-brainer to help New Hampshire employers find the qualified workers that they need to be successful and grow their businesses. Cosmetology, barbers serve a critical function in our society. I think basically every single one of us uses their services. And we should cut unnecessary red tape that's standing in the way of these qualified individuals from offering their services here in New Hampshire. We should be welcoming to individuals who want to come to our state, provide a valuable service to our communities. And that's why we believe we should recognize these licenses and provide this regulatory relief for these individuals. So with that, we urge the committee to move on to pass on HB 409, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Senator Altshuler, sorry.
Yeah, we were both in the house.
I know.
I know.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Connolly, for taking my question. What are these many studies that say there are no risks? And could you provide them to the committee?
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. The Institute for Justice does, I think it's a biannual report, specifically focusing on these licenses that are identified as low-income individuals, people that are trying to move up the economic ladder. And a lot of these very onerous requirements, it costs between $8,000 to $40,000 to go to cosmetology school. It's in our mind, somebody practicing in Massachusetts for five years, a decade, and they want to move to New Hampshire after going through all basically the same requirements in Massachusetts as New Hampshire. We think it would be very onerous and is very onerous to require them to then go back to school or get more training hours if they've been practicing in that field for an extended period of time, or if they just came out of school, since they just had to go through the same schooling requirements as somebody that graduated from a New Hampshire beauty school. But I'd be happy to follow up and provide some of those studies to the committee.
There is a testimony from the group you talked about. Sorry, I just had it.
Yes, I believe she
Yes,
planned to be here, but
Institute for Justice, we have that.
obviously with the weather the past couple of days, I think she had trouble getting out here.
You have a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Follow?
Thank you. You mentioned that, you testified that the majority of the applicants who would take advantage of this would be coming from New England states. And that, I don't know, that doesn't ring necessarily as accurate for my district, which has a large population of military people who come in to work at the shipyard for 2 years at a time. So what you're saying is those people who come in along with their service member who may have a license from the states that have the lowest minimum requirements would get a blanket pass to practice here in New Hampshire. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'd have to double check on this, but I believe that New Hampshire already recognizes all licenses held by military families. So if that is a concern, it's already happening in New Hampshire. Again, I have to double check on this. I know there's been bills in the past, but I believe that is true, that we recognize licenses held by military families, specifically since they have to travel a lot, move around a lot. And again, from where we sit, we haven't seen evidence that there's an increase in risk to the consumer based on if you're practicing barbering or cosmetology in Oklahoma or California or New York compared to New Hampshire. The thing here is that we're experiencing a vast shortage where people can't get their appointments on time. They can't grow their business in their New Hampshire communities, and it's specifically because of a lot of these red tape regulations that make it very difficult to do that. And I'll just point out on the good standing portion of this bill, that was an OPLC suggestion, and it's because if basically how this would work, if an individual comes from a different state, they want to practice in cosmetology in New Hampshire, they'd have to provide that, here's my license number. The OPLC would then, check if there's any strikes or flags against that license, so that they know that this person is not a danger, has not committed offenses in their home state, and that is a good check in our mind for OPLC to do, to make sure that this person isn't basically getting kicked out of their state and coming to New Hampshire to seek a license. So that was a good move by the House Committee to provide that safety check that I think this committee is concerned about. But again, you can follow up with OPLC, but that's usually their standard language to making sure that we're covering our bases in that area.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We appreciate your testimony. Eric Power is signed in favor, and Carol McGuire from Merrimack 27 has signed in favor. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on House Bill 409? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. Our next, I'm sorry? No, we're actually behind now, so we can keep going. So House Bill 262 is next up. My pages are all stuck together here. Okay, swap that. And this bill is by Rep. Edwards, but I don't see him here. He did make a phone call into me a few minutes ago, and perhaps that's what his message is, that he isn't going to attend. So would one of you like to volunteer to introduce this real quick? We do have one speaker. Would you? All right. If you don't mind, that'd be great. You don't actually have to read anything. You can just read what it does. The analysis is often what I've done in this situation. Yeah, that's what I have done when I've been asked to do this. We'll recognize Senator General to introduce House Bill 262.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, honorable members of the committee. This is House Bill 262 relative to laboratory testing by licensed naturopaths, and sponsors Representative Edwards, Rock, and Cushman and Hills. This bill adds naturopathic doctors to the definition of licensed medical practitioner for health facilities authorized for laboratory testing.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you introducing the bill. We have one person to testify, Dr. Michelle Half. And I bet you can explain the bill to us quite well. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me, Chairman Pearl and members of the committee. I did speak with Representative Edwards yesterday, and he said he has a lot of finance committee obligations today, so he's not able to be here.
All right, well, please introduce yourself and tell us who you're here on behalf of.
Certainly. My name is Dr. Michelle Half. I'm the president of the New Hampshire Association of Naturopathic Doctors, and we support this bill. So HB 262 simply corrects a technical error in Section 1 of RSA 151-12-C, which was passed last year and went into effect in on January 1st of this year. I do have copies of that statute if that would be helpful. So that statute inadvertently excluded naturopathic doctors from the list of licensed medical practitioners who are authorized to order and interpret labs in New Hampshire. So this should be a simple, straightforward fix. It does not change our scope of practice in any way. It simply makes the law consistent with the naturopathic healthcare practice law, which is RSA 328E, which was passed in 1995, which allows naturopathic doctors licensed in New Hampshire to order and interpret labs. So we've been diagnosing and treating patients and comfortably and proficiently ordering and interpreting labs for the last 28 years here in New Hampshire. A bit about naturopathic doctors. We do have a broad scope of practice. We can act as primary care providers. We diagnose patients using a comprehensive clinical history, physical examination, yes, laboratory testing, and when necessary, imaging tests. We treat thousands of New Hampshire residents with low cost, low risk natural therapeutics. In addition, we can and do order or prescribe pharmaceuticals when necessary. And our approach to healthcare improves patient quality of life in deeply meaningful ways, not to mention reducing the financial burden to the healthcare system by finding the root cause of illness so that patients may get better faster and stay better. So our specific concerns regarding not being included in Section 1 of RSA 151.12c are that in Section 1 of that statute, a licensed medical practitioner is defined as a physician, which is an MD or a DO, an advanced practice registered nurse, which is a nurse practitioner, or a physician assistant. So we are licensed medical practitioners authorized to order and interpret labs per our statute, which is why we're looking to be included in that item. Item 2 of that statute allows our patients to access direct access labs, where they can basically order their own labs. So this is important so that our patients can have access to that just as patients of MDs, DOs, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. In item 3 of RSA 151, it states that if a patient brings a lab result that they've ordered on themselves to a practitioner, and that practitioner is not considered a licensed medical practitioner as defined here, then that provider has to write on their report in bold that they need to see a licensed medical provider. So again, we are licensed medical providers who are authorized to do this. So that's would just make it so that our patients can come to us to interpret those labs should we decide to do that. And then lastly, in Section 4 or Item 4 in RSA 151, there is a protective factor for the provider. So it says that the licensed medical practitioner's duty of care shall not include responsibility to review or act on the test results. And then it says that the practitioner shall not be subject to liability or disciplinary actions for the failure to review or act on the results of the lab test. So we feel we should be granted those same protections in this case where patients are ordering their own labs. So again, a very straightforward fix. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you so much for your time and attention and consideration of this matter.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Any questions? I think you did a very thorough job explaining it.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
I have no one else signed up on this bill. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 262. You want to do another one?
Which one?
Next, we're doing House Bill 325, and Rep. Merchant is the only sponsor, and I don't... You're not here to do this one, are you? No? Okay, I didn't think so. All right. Well, we'll call on Senator Genro to introduce House Bill 325. She's on a roll here and doing really well. Well, thank you for doing it. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, honorable members of the committee. This is House Bill 325. It's relative to the Controlled Drug Prescription Health and Safety Program Advisory Council members. Sponsor, Representative Merchant. Committee, Health and Human Services and Elderly Affairs. This bill allows members of the Advisory Council on the Controlled Drug Prescription Health and Safety Program to remain a member of the council until their replacement has been appointed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I have no one signed in to speak on this bill. Elizabeth Sargent has signed in twice in favor, once representing the New Hampshire Pharmacists Association, and the second time representing the New Hampshire Society of Health System Pharmacists. Is there anybody who would like to speak on this bill? Well, seeing none, then I guess we may go down as the fastest hearing we've ever had in EDNA. We will close the hearing on House Bill 325. We are actually 5 minutes or 6 minutes ahead for our next hearing, which is at 10:30. So we will be in recess until 10:30. All right, seeing as it is 10:30, we will open the hearing on House Bill 391, and we'll recognize Rep. Nancy Murphy. Thank you for coming in. Welcome to the EDA.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. I'm Nancy Murphy, representing Hillsborough 12, which is the town of Merrimack. I come before you on this day after a huge snowstorm, and it seems pretty quiet up here. We're here to introduce HB 391, which has been filed to amend current RSA 126A76. The genesis of that RSA was Rep. Mark Pearson's 2018 HB 1356 when he was chair of the Commission on Environmentally Triggered Chronic Illness. Along with a few other requirements, the statute necessitates that DES and DHHS establish and implement a data sharing protocol regarding certain health and environmental information collected by the agencies. That DHHS and DES have that updated memorandum of agreement on cooperation regarding data sharing between the agencies. A joint standard operating procedure on how data layers can be shared between the two departments must be in place to enable the agencies to collaboratively identify linkages between environmental contaminants and health outcomes. In an annual report that would be submitted regarding the data sharing practices required under that statute to the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, the library, the State Library, and the Commission to study environmentally triggered chronic illness. I think it's important to note when referencing the sharing of health data that the statute specifically states that only non-protected health information or aggregated data shall be made available when it's pertinent to the matter being assessed. There's no requirement to disclose confidential or personally identifiable information otherwise protected by state and federal law. HIPAA compliance is prioritized by the agency and personal privacy remains protected. HB 391 is meant to clarify the ongoing nature of the memorandum of agreement between DES and DHHS and to ensure that that agreement remains in effect. I understand that this updated agreement is underway and awaiting approval by leadership in DHHS and DES. It's also, as amended, it's at the request of DHHS, it reduces the reporting requirement from semi-annually to an annual report. It also deletes reference to and removes the requirement for reporting to the arsenic in drinking water two-way pilot project, as that pilot project is no longer in existence. And it adds the Commission on the Environmental and Public Health Impacts of PFAS to the entities that will receive a copy of the annual report. Given the environmental and public health challenges that we currently face here in New Hampshire, there's no question that ongoing collaboration between the agencies is both necessary and appropriate to properly address the relationship between the environment and public health. That's about it. It's sort of just an updating of the agreement and addressing those things that are no longer necessary in the statute. So that's it. So I'm happy to take questions and thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. Very good job. Any questions?
Yes, please. I was going to say DHHS is also here to answer,
Okay.
give you any feedback you might request.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Murphy. It's nice to see you
Nice to
here.
see you as well.
Yeah, nice to see you here. I'm curious what would be changed to an MOU from an agreement, the current agreement sunsets? Is that why we're, just to clarify? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the question. The language as written in current statute is a memorandum of agreement. And I might defer to DHHS to clarify why the new language is a memorandum of understanding. But that's what I understand is the language that the division is going to, and they're trying to have things consistent in statute. So they thought, as we were updating this particular statute, it made sense to start there. So I guess the understanding is that there's really no difference between an MOU and an MOA.
That was going to be a question of mine, so
Okay, that's, yeah.
awesome.
May I follow up?
Sure thing.
Thank you. And thank you for taking a follow-up. So we've all probably heard that the federal government is also going to be lowering their parts per trillion standards, which means New Hampshire was in front of what is clearly a problem with forever chemicals in our water. Are you aware that there's another bill in the Senate that will be assessing what the cumulative impacts are on the public health to air, soil, and water? And would this allow for DES to access the HHS information for public health?
Oh, thank you for the question. No, I was not aware, but I'm thrilled. I think everything we can do in the state of New Hampshire and across the nation, but particularly in New Hampshire, because we've had so many areas impacted by PFAS and so many citizens. In my town alone, about 27,000, and the Seacoast. Yesterday's announcement was certainly good news. I think there's more to do, but it's a great step. And my understanding is that any of the data collected around environmental impacts are shared between DES and DHHS. One agency is looking at the environment, the other is looking at health. So I absolutely, and I'm sure again I would defer to them, but I would fully expect that that's a great, that's what we've been looking for, is the data collection, because we know the data exists. It's just a matter of having it collected and being able to look at and figure out really where we are in terms of health impacts here.
Any further questions? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Would DHHS, would you like to come up? And sounds like we got a couple questions here that perhaps you can answer. Well, good morning. Whoop, gotta hit the button until the light goes on. There you go.
There we go. Good morning. My name is, for the record, my name is Michelle Roberge. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Public Health Protection within the Division of Public Health Services at the Department of Health and Human Services. It's a long one. The department is in support of this bill as amended by the House. We worked with the sponsor on the amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Well, I'll fire the first one that I had. So
Okay.
what is the difference between an updated agreement and a memorandum of understanding?
Sure. So the current law has the term memorandum of agreement, and recently the Department of Administrative Services, through its Manual of Procedures, developed a process for which, an administrative process for agencies to use. So Manual of Procedures, MOP number 161, uses the term Memorandum of Understanding. So we're just trying to make sure the language is consistent with the administrative requirements outlined by DAS, Department of Administrative Services. So there's really not a big difference. It's just the process in which DAS has laid out for agencies to use.
Got it. Thank you. Senator Altshuler, did you want to ask your other question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So, would this memorandum of understanding also allow for DHHS and DES to share information to assess cumulative impacts of pollution on public health?
So let me just, I don't know that if I can specifically answer that, because we would have to understand what the outline is of if it's a study or something like that. I'm not entirely familiar with the bill that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
But what this agreement allows is really, it promotes the agencies to work together with sharing data. That being said, all of our data is available. That's available. We share aggregated data. So because we are we fall under HIPAA, so all of our protected health information we have to hold at the agency. If we want to share that protected health information, we actually have to work with, whether it be an agency or a research institution or whomever, we would have to develop what's called a data sharing agreement. So that's a very specific agreement if we're going to be releasing protected health information. But the data that Representative Murphy was mentioning, and what we have been sharing already with the Department of environmental services and other agencies are kind of at what we call aggregated data. And that information is actually currently available on the department's data portal. So we have a number of data that's available that we can readily share. You can actually access it yourself by going on our data portal, and that is all data that is not considered protected health information. So that would be already readily available to share. Any data that, might fall into that protected health information area, we would have to work and develop what's called a data sharing agreement to make sure that that data is held, that the requirements under HIPAA are met before we share that data.
Thank you. So just for my clarity, this is not a data sharing agreement. It is just promoting the free flow of the already aggregated data. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That being said, I know that the departments are working on data sharing agreements for specific projects that would.
But not here.
Yeah, so this overarching memorandum of understanding helps support those individual data sharing agreements that would come as a result of a specific project that would be working with data that is may have protected health information with it. So it's just this sort of overarching agreement that says the agencies will work together and we will share data that we can and go from there.
So this bill might help facilitate the information that Senator Altshuler is discussing about that could be necessary in the other bill.
Yes, so we could continue to build data sharing agreements under this overarching memorandum of agreement.
Appreciate the clarification. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate the info. I have no one else signed up to speak. Is there anybody who would like to speak before we close the hearing on House Bill 391? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. We are 3 minutes ahead still. We're doing great. So in 3 minutes, we'll open House Bill 138 at 10:45. All right, we will open the hearing on House Bill 138 and recognize Senator Altschiller to introduce the bill.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For the
Welcome to
record,
ED&A.
yes, thank you. For the record, my name is Deborah Altschiller. I am the senator for District 24, and I am happy to introduce House Bill 138 for Representative Bixby. And it is relative to the oversight of the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food. And Representative Bixby has prepared a statement. HB 138, relative to the oversight of the Commission of the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food, is a department request. It removes a couple of outdated references from state law. The first deletion is supervision of clerical staff for the State Board of Veterinary Medicine. The board has been moved to the Office of Professional Licensure, so there is no one left to supervise. The second reference is to quarantine facilities for contagious equine metritis. Metritis. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Metritis. All right. Neighboring states, this is what it sounds like when you only, hear it in your head. So neighboring states have facilities that serve this purpose, but New Hampshire has no such facility. And since the purpose is served by facilities in nearby states, there is no prospect of such a facility opening in New Hampshire. Roman II of the bill eliminates references in Agricultural Law, Chapter 436, and Roman III eliminates the associated dedicated fund. The commissioner can provide more details and answer questions as needed. And that's the end of Representative Bixby's statement.
Thank you, Senator.
So, thank you.
We'll bring Commissioner Jasper up and ask him to further opine on this bill. Good morning, Commissioner. Turn your mic on, please. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you, Senator, for introducing the bill. We did request this, and frankly, I hadn't been paying much attention to it until Representative Bixby called me yesterday. I was really aware of the first part, and obviously there is nobody working for the department in the commissioner's office now, so that makes sense. And the second part, when Dr. Crawford first became state veterinarian, there were 2 facilities in New Hampshire. They have both since stopped doing that part of their business. And frankly, as he told me, we wouldn't want to do that anyhow. If there were to be anybody looking to have such a facility in New Hampshire, it's very time consuming for our staff to deal with this. There are facilities within 4 hours, and even though somebody may say 4 hours, as he points out to them, well, you just flew them in from another part of the world. 4 hours isn't really a big hardship. So this is something that we don't even want to have in New Hampshire, but there are no facilities now. The question that I have, and you should always know the answer to the question before you ask it, but I don't know because I just started looking at this morning. It does talk about the fund. I'm not sure it exactly repeals the fund. And so if that doesn't do it, then there should be language to explicitly repeal the fund. And this may do it. I can tell you there is $19 in the fund, and we are very happy to have that $19 go to the general fund.
Well, from my conversation with Representative Bixby yesterday, he indicated that this language does repeal that fund. So I think we're all set there.
All right, and it probably would go to the general fund anyhow, but that's
that part I don't know, but I would just assume it would. But,
well, you know about assuming. So.
I know, and that's why I would not want to do that.
Yeah. So, but at any rate, it's $19, so not exactly earth-shattering.
Would you be able to actually take a look at that and perhaps provide the committee with where that is actually going to go, just as a process? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah.
Well, this time it's $19. Another one we might do in the future could be significantly more. I think
I'll see what I can.
Beneficial to the committee to know what happens.
I'll talk to the LBA and see if this language accomplishes what we want it to, and if that's what happens. But
Okay.
yes, there certainly could be
If you want
times.
to send that to me, I can distribute it to the
I
rest of
will
the
do
committee.
that.
Any further questions for the commissioner? Senator Altshuler.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for taking my question. So what is contagious equine metritis? Just, I know we're not dealing with it here, but
Don't
when we're
really
shipping
know.
horses out.
You know, it's an animal disease, but I can't tell you about it. I am not a veterinarian, and unfortunately, this state veterinarian is out on the road this morning and couldn't be here. So,
I think I know what it is, but I'm not going to provide an
Yeah.
answer just in case I'm wrong.
but to be
Right.
clear, this is something that is handled through the federal government anyhow. So if somebody is coming in and they have this problem, they go through the federal government, and the federal government works with the states. So this is not something where somebody could just import an animal and come into New Hampshire with this disease. It would still have to go through the federal process.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we thank you for the long walk over. Did
Yeah.
you use the tunnel or did you? come
No,
across
I
the-
actually came across, and so not bad out.
Awesome. Well,
Just a
thank
lot
you.
of water out there right now.
Sure is. We had a lot of snow.
Thank you.
All right, I have no one else signed up to speak on this bill. Is there anybody who would like to? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 138. We have 7 minutes until we can open the last bill of the morning here, so we will reconvene at 11 a.m. to hear House Bill 206. a.m. So we will open the hearing for House Bill 206, and I'll ask Senator Gendro to introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is House Bill 206, and it includes the Space Force and various definitions of the armed forces. Sponsors, Representative Roy Roy.
Well, that's Rockingham 31. That's his district.
Oh, Rockingham, of course.
There you
Yeah,
go.
thank you for the correction.
You're welcome.
This bill adds to the Space Force in various definitions of the armed forces.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Perry, would you like to come up and give us a little info on the bill? Just turn your mic on, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Warren Perry. I'm the Deputy Adjutant General for New Hampshire's Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. The department supports this bill as it adds the newest member of the Department of Defense to the various definitions of veteran across the spectrum. So, as you know, there are several benefits associated with veterans service that are tied to service as veterans in the Department of Defense. And this bill just cleans up the definition and includes the Space Force as they were added. So now, and it's really a housekeeping bill to make sure that we are appropriately recognizing legislatively and, not legislatively, but statutorily representing the service of those who serve in the Space Force.
Thank you. I guess for my own knowledge and perhaps the benefit of the committee, could you just give us a little bit of background on what the Space Force, what it actually does and is?
The Space Force was created about a year ago, 2 years ago, and it provides defense in the space domain. So they manage all the satellites. For example, New Boston Tracking Station is now not a U.S. Air Force installation. It is now a Space Force installation. So they manage and track all those satellites and manage the space domain for the Department of Defense and for the country. That's the best definition I have. I'm an old Army guy myself, so the only thing I cared about in satellites is that it kept me where I was supposed to be on the ground. I don't get too much into space, but their mission really is to manage the space domain, which is an emerging domain for the Department of Defense. Pretty important. All of our communications, for the Air Force, for the Marine Corps, for the Navy, all of those things are managed in that domain in space.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Perry? This seems like a fairly straightforward bill, so. If I could just add, it is important to recognize that service, right? So we don't want to be exclusionary, or exclude members of the Space Force from the benefits that they may have earned by virtue of their service. Many of them will have been Air Force veterans or veterans of the other departments, the Navy, the Army. The Space Force kind of recruited them out of the other departments, and then obviously they're building their own force as well. So it's a pretty important thing that we continue to recognize the totality of the veteran population in New Hampshire. So from that perspective, it's not just about what they're doing in space, but that the state continues to recognize that service. So from the department's perspective, it's really important to be able to get this done. Thank you, sir. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I have two folks signed in support, Eric Power and Diane Power. Anybody else that would like to speak on House Bill 206 before we close the hearing? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. I believe that finishes our 9 bills for today. We did very well. Anything more from members of the committee that you'd like to talk about before we get done for today? Nothing? As it stands right now, I don't believe we're going to meet next week unless we get more bills in today in time to meet the calendar deadline. So we'll let you know if we do, but I think we're going to have next Wednesday off is what I think. All right? Unless we get something in communications here very soon, because when's the calendar deadline, Philip?
It's tomorrow.
Oh, it's tomorrow at noon. Okay, I was thinking it was today. Okay. Very good.
Now we have 2.
Right now, we only have two, and I don't want to bring you in for that. I haven't reviewed him yet, so we'll see. But, all right, well, thank you. We're done for today, and appreciate you guys coming in.